It all started on a Tuesday, when Leander Starr Jameson led a column out of Bechuanaland with more certainty than he had reason to feel. By the winter of 1895, the Highveld of South Africa was a pressure cooker. The discovery of gold on the Witwatersrand had turned Johannesburg into a boomtown of foreign miners and financiers, the Uitlanders, who poured wealth into the Transvaal but were denied political rights by President Paul Kruger's Boer government. Tensions over franchise, taxation, and control of the goldfields created a potent, combustible mix. Into that tinderbox stepped a conspiracy. Cape Colony magnates, mining barons, and politicians who believed the Transvaal should fall under British influence. At the center of that plot was Cecil Rhodes, imperialist, financier, and, at the time, Prime Minister of the Cape, who wanted annexation by any means. The plan was audacious and crude in equal measure. The Johannesburg Reform Committee, a body of Uitlander leaders desperate for change, would stage an uprising in the town. A column of armed men under Jameson, backed covertly by Cape officials, would cross from Bechuanaland, march on Johannesburg, and rescue the insurgents. The Boer government would be toppled and British control established. The conspirators concealed financial backing, stockpiled weapons, and smoothed the plan's edges in smoke-filled rooms and private correspondence. On December 29, 1895, Jameson set out with roughly 500 to 600 men. He crossed the border expecting the signal. An uprising in Johannesburg he believed was already in motion. But the signal never came. The Reform Committee, badly organized and cautious, failed to rise. Instead of meeting cheering rebels, Jameson's force found empty streets and a population that, weary and fearful, did not join a foreign-led insurrection. The raid collapsed with brutal speed. Boer commandos mobilized under the Transvaal authorities. Fighting broke out around Doornkop on January 2, 1896. Jameson's troops, short of ammunition and cut off from reinforcements, were forced to surrender. The raid had failed to ignite the revolution it was meant to trigger, and paid for that failure with blood and humiliation. What followed was an explosive unraveling of the conspiracy. The Transvaal government arrested Reform Committee leaders in Johannesburg, exposing the link between the insurgents and external planners. The presence of Rhodes's fingerprints, through letters, telegrams, and implicated aides, transformed a bungled military incursion into a diplomatic scandal. Paul Kruger's government paraded the captured raiders, and British imperial pride took a blow. The political fallout crossed oceans. Britain's government was embarrassed. Cecil Rhodes, whose intimate involvement could not be credibly denied, was forced from office as Prime Minister of the Cape. Jameson and his officers were court-martialed and imprisoned by the Transvaal. The men of the Reform Committee received harsh sentences. International outrage and press frenzy followed. Britain pressed for leniency. Kruger's stern reply and the humiliation of a covert imperial adventure gone wrong widened the chasm between Boer and British spheres. The Jameson Raid did more than topple careers. It crystallized mistrust and hardened positions. Afrikaner nationalists felt betrayed and threatened. Imperialists in Britain saw Boer defiance as an affront. The episode became a rallying cry on both sides, feeding the antagonisms that would explode into the Second Boer War in 1899. The raid demonstrated how a small, secret conspiracy, driven by greed for mineral wealth and ambitious men's designs, could reshape politics, provoke reprisals, and feed a larger, deadlier conflict. In the end, the conspiracy exposed the frailty of empire as much as it did the audacity of its architects. Jameson returned to Britain a disgraced figure. Rhodes resigned, and Johannesburg's Uitlanders remained disenfranchised for years. The short, sharp episode remains a study in how clandestine plans, grafted onto private ambition and colonial arrogance, can fail spectacularly and leave a continent angrier and more divided than before. The Jameson Raid was not merely a failed military incursion. It was a portrait of a conspiracy that misread the loyalties of men and the limits of power. Its echo, diplomatic scandal, ruined reputations, and an embittered road to war, would reverberate across southern Africa for the decade that followed.